Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWAS. We are continuing on with the college football playoff. Got the Cotton Bowl here. Ohio State, Texas. I'm recording this before the Penn State Notre Dame game, so I don't know how we did in that one yet. Kicks off in a couple hours. Hopefully by the time you're watching this, Penn State +2 hit. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, in this one, we're talking Ohio State, Texas. Let's do it.
Welcome to the SWAS.
All right, so like I said, Ohio State, Texas in the Cotton Bowl. Looks like Texas is catching a full 6 across the board. Looks like all the 5.5s are gone at the time of recording. Total sitting at 53.5 pretty much across the board. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in heavily on the Ohio State side. Over 75% of the tickets, over 80% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Ohio State offense against the Texas defense. And this is a pretty elite matchup on this side of the ball here. Ohio State offensively, 4th in OFEI, 4th in yards per play, 9th in success rate. It's not just their overall numbers, though. It's specifically how they've looked in the last couple games. It's been pretty impressive. Matched up against a Texas defense that, I mean, they might be the best defense in the country. Ohio State probably has something to say about that defensively, but certainly one of, if not the best defense in the country. Texas is 1st in the country in yards per play allowed, 21st in success rate. So will Ohio State be able to continue their onslaught, their offensive onslaught against this Texas defense? Well, you take a look at some of these regular season numbers, and you might think Texas is able to stop Ohio State from running the ball. And honestly, I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. During the regular season, Ohio State's matchups against top 25 defenses, that's Iowa, Oregon, Nebraska, Indiana, Michigan. In those games, they were held to less than 4 yards per carry, under 130 rushing yards per game, 43.8% success rate per rush. So those Ohio State run game isn't unstoppable. We've seen several defenses this year that were able to limit this Ohio State run game. That being said, I mean, the last couple weeks, Tennessee, that's an elite run defense. Ohio State, 33 carries, 156 yards, 4.7 yards per carry. Oregon, another elite defense, although they're a little bit vulnerable to the run. Ohio State, 31 carries, 181 yards, 5.8 yards per carry. So yeah, you look back at the regular season, you can find some instances of defense giving Ohio State problems on the ground, but last couple games, it looks like this Ohio State team has just turned over a new leaf. They look unstoppable. Now, we definitely don't want to downplay the Texas defensive front, because like I said, they might be the best defense in the country. Last 5 games of the regular season, they were allowing 3.09 yards per carry. Success rate per rush actually up over 47%, a little concerning. In the playoffs so far, they were able to completely take the run away from Clemson. Clemson, not really a great rushing attack, though. And then Arizona State was able to run the ball a little bit with Scadaboo. I mean, he broke a couple plays. As a whole, Arizona State wasn't consistently running the ball. They were able to make some plays, though. So if you're asking me a straight-up question, Kyle, do you think the Texas defense can stop Ohio State from running the ball? I think the answer to that question would be yes. I think they are more than capable of stopping the Ohio State rushing attack. That being said, with all the attention they have to put on those wide receivers and that passing attack, it may open up some opportunities. I mean, you cannot take the Ohio State passing attack, especially the way they're playing right now, lightly. I don't like to use words like unstoppable, but let's face it, Will Howard and these Ohio State wide receivers, they look pretty close to unstoppable the way they're playing right now. I mean, the first game, let's look at their games against some elite defenses, shall we? Their first game, week 7, on the road in Eugene. Will Howard, 326 yards, 2 touchdowns, passer rating over 177. First round against Tennessee, elite defense, maybe a top 10 defense in the country. 311 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick, passer rating over 188. Oregon gets another shot. How did Will Howard do? Well, he only dropped back to pass 26 times in the entire game, still threw for 319, 3 touchdowns, passer rating over 206. Outside of the Michigan game in the cold weather where Ohio State basically just choked, I mean, they kept shooting themselves in the foot. Outside of that game, Will Howard and this Ohio State passing attack have cooked on basically every single defense they've seen. And if you're thinking, oh, well, Kyle, this Texas pass rush is different, though. I mean, you're right. This is a very good pass rush. They're 9th in pressure rate, 8th in sack rate, 4th in pass rush grade. Look at Oregon's pass rush numbers. They're pretty much just as good Will Howard cooked on this defense not once, twice. Once was on the road in Eugene. Yes, we do see a little bit of a production dip with Will Howard when he experiences pressure. That being said, how many elite defenses does this dude need to put up 350 and 3 touchdowns on before we just admit, I don't think anyone could stop this offense? I mean, yes, QB rating takes a dip. Turnover-worthy play rate, yards per attempt definitely takes a dip under pressure. But Oregon twice, Tennessee, those are elite pass rushes, and it hasn't really mattered. Now, you could say, well, Kyle, Oregon runs man coverage. They're 28th in man coverage frequency. Texas runs primarily zone coverage, so this is a little bit of a different look here for Will Howard. Thing is, Ohio State's passing numbers pretty much just as elite against zone coverage as they are against man coverage. It's not like we see a huge drop-off in production when Will Howard sees zone coverage. I'm just not seeing it here. There's nothing on paper that indicates Ohio State's passing attack can be stopped right now. Now, again, I'm going to repeat myself here. We really do not want to overlook this Texas defense. Like I said it a number of times already. They might be the best defense in the country. So by no means do I want to be like, oh, they're unstoppable. Texas defense doesn't stand a chance. It's not how I feel. This Texas defense is very good. And if you look at their body of work here, I mean, Sam Leavitt did not throw the ball successfully on Texas. I know the final score, Arizona State put up a bunch of numbers. And if you look at the box score, yeah, they did have some passing stats, but Sam Leavitt was 24 of 46, 222 yards and a pick, an 88 passer rating. That is not a successful day throwing the football. Remember, 2 of their big plays through the air, Scadaboo threw one of them, and I think the wide receiver threw the other one. They weren't thrown by Leavitt. They were trick plays. So by no means was Arizona State consistently throwing the ball in Texas at all. Now, Klubnik had a decent stat line against Texas in the first round, but remember, he didn't do shit until they were down 21-24 points. I mean, Texas jumped out to a huge lead. When you're playing with a lead, you tend to sit back in coverage a little more. Klubnik wasn't doing anything against this Texas defense until they already had a very comfortable lead. You look at their numbers on the regular season. I mean, on the year, they allowed 143 passing yards per game. This is the regular season. 34% success rate per dropback, 5.15 yards per pass snap. Those are some elite pass defense numbers. So, I mean, you could make the argument that other than Cade Klubnik in the second half of a game they were up 24 points, nobody has thrown the ball on this Texas defense all year. You can make that argument, and you wouldn't be wrong in saying it. That being said, you can say the same exact thing about Oregon. Look at Oregon's pass defense numbers this year if you take out the 2 Ohio State games. 5.74 yards per pass attempt allowed, 163 passing yards allowed per game, 31% success rate per dropback. So if Oregon never played Ohio State, they would be looking like the best pass defense in the country. So yeah, we could look at Texas numbers against the pass and say, hey, nobody has really thrown the ball in this defense. You can say the same thing about Oregon, and Ohio State threw all over them twice. Not once, twice. Once was in Eugene. So as a whole on this side of the ball, I mean, I hate that this video is probably coming off so one-sided. I probably sound like an Ohio State fan right now, but let's be honest, those last 2 performances against Oregon the second time and Tennessee, that was so overly impressive. That looked like an NFL offense playing against FPS teams, really. So I don't know. I mean, this Texas defense is probably their toughest test of the year, truly. And do I think Ohio State is going to boat race the Texas defense like they did the last 2 teams and put up a 40-piece? No, I don't. But at the same time, I feel it would be irresponsible to put my money on Ohio State not scoring points, because the way they're playing right now is out of this world. But what about the matchup on the other side? We got the Ohio State defense against the Texas offense, and Buckeyes should definitely have the edge on this side of the football. I mean, I mentioned how Texas might be the best team in the best defense in the country. Well, if they are, Ohio State's probably the second best defense in the country. They're second in yards per play, first in success rate, third in DFEI. The Texas offense, 26 in yards per play, 30th in success rate. I mean, this Ohio State pass, they haven't been thrown on since Oregon the first time. In their last 6 games, this is the last 6 games of the regular season, 123.5 passing yards allowed per game, 123. 5.02 yards per pass attempt, success rate under 29%. And I mean, you got Nebraska in there with Raiola. You got Penn State with Drew Aller in there. I mean, yeah, Michigan, Northwestern, Purdue, but you got Indiana in there. One of the most explosive passing attacks in the country, certainly a top 25 passing attack there. We all saw what this Ohio State defense did to Nico and the Tennessee passing attack. On the season, they were averaging over 8.2 yards per pass attempt, success rate up close to 50% per dropback. Against Ohio State, Nico was 14 of 31, 104 yards with a 73 passer rating. For reference, the entire season, Nico's worst game was a 103 passer rating on the road in Athens against Ohio State, 73 passer rating. His worst game of the season by far. Now, we do have to mention that Dillon Gabriel did have himself a nice looking stat line against Ohio State last week. 29 of 41, 299 yards, 2 touchdowns, a 148 passer rating. But kind of like what we were saying with Cade Klubnik against the Texas defense, he really didn't do shit until it was 31-0 Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State was up big before Dillon Gabriel starting to make play. I mean, they actually didn't even score until I believe it was the final play of the first half. Instead of kicking the field goal, they went for the touchdown and got it for the first points of the game. So he really didn't do anything against this Ohio State defense until it was 31-0 already. And by the way, this is Dillon Gabriel and the Oregon passing attack, one of the most explosive offenses in all of college football. That does not describe Texas. I mean, not that they have a bad offense, but we know what the story is with this Texas passing attack. We've been talking about it all year. First 5 games of the year, they played some bad defenses and they racked up some really nice looking numbers. Over 10 yards per attempt, 53% success rate, 322 passing yards per game. In their next 8 games, including the SEC championship game, I mean, these numbers don't look all that great. Success rate per dropback under 39%, 7.2 yards per attempt, 255 yards per game. So this Texas passing attack, I mean, it really hasn't been all that good in a while now. I know Quinn Ewers threw for 358 yards in the SEC championship game against Georgia. He dropped back to pass 46 times, threw a couple picks. He had a 122 passer rating in the game. By no means was this an efficient performance from Quinn Ewers. Now, where we do need to give Quinn Ewers and the Texas offense some credit is the Arizona State game. Even though a big section of the game they weren't really moving the ball, they looked good in the beginning and then on the last drive. He was 20 of 30, 322 yards, 3 touchdowns, a pick, a 183 passer rating. This is a solid game here. Problem is, Arizona State does not have a good pass defense. That's been the weakness of the team for most of the season. This is not a great secondary. They have a terrible pass rush. I mean, I would hope Quinn Ewers put up a decent stat line against Arizona State. If he didn't, we have a real problem here. Before that, in the first round against Clemson, I mean, he didn't really do much. Texas did a ton on the ground. They were running the ball on Clemson. That's the weakness of Clemson's defense. But Quinn Ewers against Clemson, 17 of 24, 200 yards, a touchdown, a pick, a 147 passer rating. Not that this is a bad game, but certainly wouldn't call it a great game. Now, if you are looking to back the Texas offense here, you can point at this. Ohio State runs a lot of man coverage. They're 30th in the country in man coverage frequency. Texas, much more efficient throwing numbers against man rather than zone. So, okay, there's something if you're looking to back Quinn Ewers in the Texas offense here. And let's not pretend that this Ohio State pass defense is just impenetrable. Like, we can't even fathom somebody throwing the ball on Ohio State. We saw it earlier in the year. Week 7 on the road in Eugene, Dillon Gabriel had no problems throwing the ball on Ohio State. 341 yards, 10 yards per attempt, 44.1% success rate per dropback. I will say, this was 3 months ago, and since then, I mean, other than Dillon Gabriel in the second half down 30 points, really nobody has thrown the ball in Ohio State. So this was 3 months ago now. The biggest problem I see for Quinn Ewers and the Texas passing attack is right here. I mean, I just can't get around this. Quinn Ewers under pressure. First of all, this is from the regular season. We definitely see a drop-off in production here when Quinn Ewers is pressured. But look specifically in the playoff games. He is not handling pressure well at all. In the playoffs so far, we've seen 2 games, right? Clemson and Arizona State. In those 2 games, he was pressured on just 28.1% of his dropbacks. That's not a lot. That's a pretty average amount. I mean, slightly below average. Texas has been keeping him clean, 28.1% pressure rate. That's not bad at all. In those dropbacks, when he was under pressure in those 2 games, he was 5 of 14, 63 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks, and an 11 passer rating. An 11. That's not a typo. An 11 passer rating against Clemson and Arizona State when he was under pressure. Let's compare those 3 pass rushes, shall we? Clemson, 38th in pass rush grade, 46th in sack rate, 41st in pressure rate. Arizona State, no pass rush at all. One of the worst probably the worst pass rush of any Power 4 school. Ohio State, one of the best pass rushes in the country. In fact, they're first in sack rate. You were struggling with the 2 pass rushes on the left here. Now you're going to see Ohio State. Quinn Ewers had an 11 passer rating against the Clemson pass rush and the Arizona State pass rush. Now we got the Ohio State pass rush. I just can't get around that. Now, as far as Texas giving Quinn Ewers some run support in this game, I'm really not sure what to think. I mean, Oregon was able to run the ball a little bit on Ohio State in week 7. Other than that, nobody really ran the ball efficiently against Ohio State. And I mean, the second round game against Oregon, 28 carries, negative 23 rushing yards. They averaged almost negative 1 yard per carry. Obviously, sacks had a lot to do with it, but Oregon wasn't able to run the ball at all against Ohio State. Tennessee wasn't really able to run the ball on Ohio State either. I will say both of those games, and in my opinion, this is what makes this particular matchup tough to judge on whether or not Texas is going to be able to run the ball on Ohio State. Both of those two matchups, I mean, Tennessee and Oregon kind of had to abandon the run pretty early. They were down so many points so fast. So I really don't know if Tennessee or Oregon would have been able to run the ball on Ohio State had they not gone down 24, 27 points almost immediately. And also, Jordan James and Sampson both got hurt in those games, I think in the second quarter. Now, the game was already out of hand, and they weren't able to run the ball on Ohio State before they got hurt. But it's definitely important to take note, if we're trying to answer the question, will Texas be able to run the ball on Ohio State? These last two data points, I mean, you look at them, you're like, oh, no one can run the ball on Ohio State. Look at these two games. I mean, it was a 24-point game immediately. Then the opposing team's back got hurt. I wouldn't call those the most reliable data points. I don't know. Maybe Texas is able to run the ball on Ohio State a little bit. But as a whole, I think Quinn Ewers is going to be under pressure. I've been saying it all year. I don't really trust this Texas passing attack. I think it's going to be tough sledding for Texas offensively. So where does that leave me in terms of placing a bet? Well, as I'm sure you guessed, I'm on Ohio State. I got a 5.5. I apologize. This video was so one-sided. I'm not an Ohio State fan or anything. I just, based on what we've seen the last two games, I don't know how I can make a strong argument for a Texas bet here. That being said, I'm a little worried that I would imagine the entire planet Earth is betting Ohio State here. Definitely don't like that. And I mean, 2 data points is kind of crazy. I mean, the look-ahead line for this game was close to a pick. It's not Ohio State -6. That's definitely what I would classify as an overreaction. The problem is it's hard to unsee those games, and it's hard to unsee Texas almost losing to Arizona State, who isn't even in the same discussion as Ohio State. So in my opinion, it's got to be Ohio State. I'm siding with the world here. If you're asking me what my favorite bet is, though, I also have a bet on the under at 53.5. And if you put a gun to my head and said, Kyle, give me one bet you think is going to hit in this game, I think I like the under slightly more than Ohio State. I think Texas defense is able to make Ohio State's offense look human and look mortal. So I think Texas defense is going to be the sleeper pick and show up. But as far as Texas offensively, I don't have a lot of faith in them. So I like the under, and I'm on Ohio State -5.5. We'll talk about it on the live show, 4 p.m. Eastern time. I'll bring on some guests. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you in the comments. If you want to see all the bets I currently have open, head over to KyleKirms.com and click on open bets. Yeah, let's have ourselves a good one. Please remember to bet responsibly. Hit me up in the Discord if you need me.